to experience what it's like to be a part of the Waipapa Tūmatoro whānau? Join us at our Manawa Mai Info Evening and Open Day events to find out what it's like to be a student at the University of Auckland. Register today.
Up to triple elixir with the earthquake and plague, sudden death, and oh my gosh, at the last second.
That was actually a big upset. Sudden death.
I think it's their game right there. Go Zero. There you have it.
Congratulations, what a great game.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the last night of Stage 1 of the UOA LPL Pro Clash Cup ANZ for our first season. My name is Proto, and joining me for his first night of Clash Royale goodness is none other than the man Astro himself.
Good evening all, my name is Astro. It's great to be here, Proto, coming in live from the LPL studio in the Sky Tower from Auckland, New Zealand. And what an amazing tournament we've had so far. Some of the best in Australia and New Zealand fighting out for that ANZ champion. I can't wait to get into today's matches. But how does the tournament work, Proto?
Well, the tournament, as we will see here in this short explainer, we started out with a fair few members, 236 to be exactly, leaving us with 16 remaining. It's broke up into 2 stages, the top 16 in a double elim fashion for both stages. We'll battle it out until we find the top for both respective stages. Each match is a best of 3. Obviously, each match requires a new deck, given that once you play the card in said deck, it is no longer usable anymore, which allows for the opening for some interesting plays.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, with this one selection of your cards, you can't really use it in more than one deck. So spells, for examples, which are very common across many decks, you need to really limit it to one of the other decks. So it'll be interesting to see the strategies that the people gather up in today's matchup.
Well, speaking of today's matchups, what are the players playing for? At the end of the day, everyone wants to walk away with something in our prize pool. Every single person is going to walk away with some share of 10,000 Australian dollars, which you love to see at the end of the day. Everyone walks away with something. Nobody here really is a loser, let's be completely honest. That is a huge dub.
Yeah, I mean, it's not too bad if you lose every single match or even most of the matches and still go home with $200. That's still pretty good, and I believe is the first community-sponsored tournament by Supercell themselves, and what, $10,000, what a way to kick it off.
Yeah, that is it's a lot of money, and it's good to see that everyone walks away with something at the end of the day. But let's see how we got to where we are currently, our upper bracket. The remaining players up there, Lemons and Professor Live, the last 2 to hold on for the moment. And they are going to be locking things down in pretty spectacular fashion in the upper bracket so far.
Yeah, I mean, these players really haven't lost a match so far, but obviously that is going to change with Lemons being one of the highest win rate players in our upper bracket tournament.
One of the best defensive players as well. I mean, through the weeks, we've seen him do absolutely amazing things, but unfortunately, not everyone has had an amazing run, and we do have some players down in the lower bracket side, so we'll have a quick little look at how things are going on the other side of the spectrum. Our 2 matches for the evening, Default, Felipe, and Fichi and Zulnino will be the ones that kick us off. So an interesting way to sort of start the evening, but still some big names in this lower bracket so far.
Yeah, I mean, these players would have only lost 1 game so far, and we've got some very big names, and Zulnino, I think you mentioned in the last broadcast that we had, is probably your underdog, but I would say Default might be one to look out for, given that he's beaten SB and Czech Pro in previous matches.
Yeah, it definitely could be the case, but we'll have to see how things pan out. Speaking of how they're going to pan out, obviously we have our first match of the night. We're going to have a look a little bit more in depth at our 2 players, Default and Felipe. Given the seeding, given the win rates, Felipe a little bit more favoured, I would say, coming into this matchup. But I mean, speaking about ladder play, Default definitely takes the crown on that one.
Yeah, Default has definitely been grinding out his ladder, but we can see a slight drop in the win rate, but it doesn't really matter because in the arena, a lot of the games are based on matchup as well as skill. But we see Felipe really not been pushing out the ladder, but I'm sure he's been grinding the challenge and victory challenges.
Yeah, definitely going to be somewhat of a bootleg rematch, I guess we could say, from the qualifiers, given that this is our 4th and 3rd seed meeting up once more in the lower bracket side. Well, I'd assume they would have played in the qualifiers, so to see them go at it again here in the main bracket side of things is going to be absolutely amazing. I mean, given the recent metas that you've seen E-Giant, we've seen Skeleton King himself. I mean, what are you expecting the meta be tonight? Is it going to be sort of sticking to that sort of Skeleton King E-Giant, or are we going to see more of a cycle style board out?
Yeah, I mean, in the previous match, we saw that Default kind of used, Hog EQ with Bomb Tower, Bridge Spam, and Mortar with Queen and Miner as well. So a broad range of archetypes are being showed by Default. And then in the previous matches, Felipe, I think he won one game by default. So we didn't really get to see all the matchups and decks he would have brought to the tournament. So I think it might be a little bit more of a surprise for Default.
Well, we are going to head right on into the thick of it. Default versus Felipe. We got the player cams back. You love to see it this week. And starting off quickly, left side, Miner to come down first, and it is going to be the Zappies to counter. So no damage conceded and a half decent trade, only -1, but they did with it. And there you go. Straight off the bat, the log to do some damage, and Felipe, I would say, off to the better start.
Yeah, so we do see that Giant Skeleton, which has been buffed in recent balance changes, coming for Felipe, and we see Default using that Queen with Miner and Log. So do we expect a Mortar deck from Default in this one?
Definitely could be a possibility. Could just be the cycle with the Valkyrie there as well. It could be a bit more of an indicator, but that death damage is going to be huge there for Felipe, pretty much wiping out most of the things that was coming down that left lane. But there you go, Royal Giant. So that is going to be the win condition, the Tesla and the air delivery coming in to counter. But with that Earthquake spell, Royal Giant is going to be good for at least one. So some damage from Felipe, but not too much. Default now going to look to maybe counter on this left side.
Yeah, so we see the Tesla, which is kind of going to absorb some of those Royal Giant shots, but the Tesla doesn't really have a very high HP, so the Earthquake's really going to be helping Felipe out here. But we'll yet to see kind of how the matchups will progress during double elixir time. So we see now 1 minute 30 seconds left in the matchup before we head into overtime, and the Mortar probably still hiding, Default probably still hiding that Mortar yet for the double elixir. But this is probably going to be an interesting matchup so far.
Yeah, it could be the Mortar, it could be something like a Poison as well. Obviously, it could be anything, we don't know. But the deck so far, minor cycle, or at least that's what it is pretending to be right now, as the Giant Skeleton lumbers his way down the left lane. The Cloak is going to come out and try and get rid of him as quick as possible. The death damage, though, should be able to clean up a lot of what's going on this left side. Good damage dealt with Miner on the right, though, so a little bit of a switch up from Default to attempt to get some more chip damage in here.
Oh, and there is a Poison, as you said, so we've got a minor Poison from Default with the classic Royal Giant and Giant Skeleton. So Giant Skeleton getting to the tower might be a little bit difficult in this case, but I think he probably will have to use the Royal Giant as the main win condition here. So we see the Fisherman coming and blocking in that Fire Spirit, and the Miner being used as a defense by default, and there we see the Tesla coming and absorbing some of the shots, and is probably going to not make it to the tower this time around.
Yeah, seen a little bit of a struggle here from Felipe to get that Giant Skeleton to connect, as well as the Royal Giant has been dealt with really well by Default so far. So to see him sort of chipping away at this right tower now as he shifts the focus to that side of the arena is definitely going to be a focus for Felipe as well, because he has to defend it as he comes through the left side with a pretty big push once more, shut down by 3 cards, 6 elixir taken down by what? 6 elixir as well, so a great trade for 12. Default on this defense game right now is looking absolutely impeccable. Felipe yet to really put a scratch on that top end of the arena.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, the only way he can really get is with that Miner onto the tower and Poison, but we do see some very fast cycle by defaults, and the defense is very good against Felipe. In this case, we see now Felipe switch on sides and go to the right side, but the Tesla comes in on time. You see the EQ coming, and it looks like the Royal Giant is going to get a few more shots on the right-hand side tower, changing things up a little bit.
That is big damage on that right side. The Hunter actually tanking the Tesla's lock and taking the brunt of that damage. The Valkyrie is going to be able to clear out the Fisherman here, but I mean, ultimately, a good elixir trade leading Default, though, in terms of tower damage, 200 ahead of Felipe right now. has to do some big cycling here if he wants to walk away with this victory, because there's still plenty of time. I mean, a minute for both players to try and cycle through and deal the damage to these towers required. I mean, it's going to take an absolute effort, but right now, this right side, Royal Giant is not even going to get a shot off.
No, that's right. We see the towers pretty close in HP right now, 1957 versus 1676. So it just depends on if Felipe manages to get those Royal Giant, just cycle them out as quickly as possible. But with 25 seconds left, things are looking a little bit better for Default. Can Felipe do anything in these last 20 seconds?
Unless he can get the Royal Giant on for 2 or 3 shots, it's looking like in max overtime, it is going to be Default to walk away with it. Just having that poison available, having the miner constantly chipping away at the tower has meant that he can lock it down in maximum overtime. An absolutely amazing show of defense from Default. Unfortunately for Felipe, all of his efforts thwarted in the defensive side, and that is going to be game number 1 going in favor of Default.
Yeah, we do see Default quietly snug over there with his win. So obviously Minor Poison out of the question. Does he have any more faster cycle decks in his stash, or is he going to be putting out something a little bit heavier like a heavy beatdown deck?
I mean, we do still have Hog available, arrows as well, Cannon even. So if you wanted to go for sort of a Hog cycle with a Cannon, sort of a similar type of deck to the Minor cycle with the Poison, obviously there is multiple avenues that can go down. Let's have a quick little recap of what we just saw. Obviously, there was a lot going on, more of a defensive-minded game from Default, slightly less on the average elixir cost, but the cycle the same for both players, 9 on both sides of the card.
Yeah, it looks like very similar cycle and just slightly cheaper for Default on that, and that just managed to get him the edge, especially in the triple elixir where he could kind of, widen that advantage, that slight advantage that he had, and then ended up winning in overtime.
Yeah, Default did a really good job of just constantly keeping that cycle going with the Poison Miner. I mean, we've seen it in prior weeks where players have these cards available. They have Earthquakes, they have Poisons, they have Miners. They just haven't been cycling them as much as they should have been, but that was masterclass on cycle. Default didn't even need to do huge amounts of damage. He just had to play defense, and he did it to a T. I mean, the Valkyrie combo with the Tesla, just completely wiping out 12 elixir pushes on that left lane. I mean, Felipe just could not get through at all up until the end, sort of dying seconds of overtime there, and even still couldn't really put a dent in what Default was doing whatsoever with his deck.
Yeah, that was some impeccable defense by Default there. Felipe just couldn't quite get through from that defense, and because he had the giant skeleton, he couldn't really get that to the tower, and he wasn't really getting much value with the huge bomb that he had. So yeah, why don't we look at our next match?
Game number 2, obviously being a best of 3. We still have a possibility of 2 more, so if Felipe can come back from that first match and take it here. The bar barrel trade at the bridge for both players, albeit Default's not going to let that damage go off, neither is Felipe. So both dealt with relatively easily, and it is going to be sort of the counter push, I guess, from the Zappies, but they are going to be cleaned up from the Royal Ghost and the E-Wiz. So a lot quicker times to start this week as opposed to what we've seen in previous playdays.
Yeah, so we do see that Electro Wizard and the Pecker, there we go. So we've got a bridge spam being played by Felipe. Is he going to be using the classic bridge spam deck? I have seen it being one of the highest win rate decks in this meta. But it's probably, Default is probably looking like he might be running the Royal Giant in this case with the Giant Skeleton. So it'll be interesting to see whether Felipe knows the ins and outs of the decks and whether he can use that to the advantage, or whether Default has some other skills up his sleeve.
Hunter is absolutely insane. I mean, he can deal with a tank in 2-3 shots, but there you go, it is going to be the Ram Rider. So it's a lot of a bridge spam coming in from Default. Big damage being dealt, though, by the Royal Giant. 2 shots now, the third Ram Rider is going to accidentally activate, well, accidentally, the King Tower. So Felipe, unfortunate connection on there, but Default, happy with that. He's going to concede a lot of damage, though, on the left.
Yeah, the Bandit does manage to make it to the tower and gets a few shots off. So we've got 1747 left there on the left-hand side tower. But we do have that Ram Rider from Felipe, which is going to snare that Royal Giant and the Giant Skeleton a little bit, which might make it slightly a better matchup for Felipe. What do you think, Proto?
mean, yeah, he's got the P.E.K.K.A available as a very expensive tank counter.
Yeah.
But that, as I was saying, that's where the Hunter comes into his own. He can deal with those tanks in as long as he's up close, 2-3 up close shots. So having the Hunter available is going to be good to deal with the card like P.E.K.K.A, because he can just pretty much wipe it off the face of the earth in a couple of blows. So Felipe's going to have to be sparing on how he spends this, but it is going to be the early draw from the Lightning. So revealing that final spell early here is going to sort of allow Default to make his plays knowing that that Lightning is in the rotation now.
Yeah, and we see a lot of troops being spammed at the bridge with the P.E.K.K.A and just being eaten right now. We've got a counter push coming from Default with the Giant Skeleton, Zappies, and Hunter behind, but we've got a P.E.K.K.A kind of trying to defend all of that, but the Fisherman pulls the P.E.K.K.A back, and we've got a little bit of a stalemate at the bridge, and we've got a Royal Giant coming down now as well on the left-hand side tower. And does he manage to get a shot?
Looks like he's going to get at least 2 or 3. Unfortunately, not able to be stopped. The snowball there to attempt to slow him down. It will, in fact, stop him getting that last shot off, but the damage already dealt. Felipe actually still in the lead somehow, even though Default has, again, been having an absolutely amazing game on the defensive side. But you look at the Elixir leak, I mean, 2.8 so far for Default, definitely seeming to be a little bit more hesitant with his placements at the moment.
Yeah, and we're probably going to see a lot of match sort of fighting at the bridge, and it's just going to be to see who gets the bigger damage in the bridge with the bombs that we've got there. And I think the splash damage from the Royal Ghost is definitely going to be helping, but it looks like he's kind of got stuck at the bridge there and kind of went ahead of the P.E.K.K.A, and now we see a big push coming in from Default. And how will Felipe defend against all of this?
I mean, without having his P.E.K.K.A in rotation, it's going to make things difficult. He's going to have to save up for it now as the cycle comes back around. There it is, right at the bridge to defend, but the Royal Giant's good for 1. He's good for 2. Can he get a 3rd? Yes, he can! Huge damage on this left side, 400 health. For Felipe remaining as we go into triple Elixir. Default now is going to have to do his best to defend. The Ram Rider comes down the left side. It does connect the charge. It's going to get multiple swings in. All these troops pushing down, and it's the lightning spell to connect Felipe to bring it back from the depths to take game number 2 and send us into the 3rd.
Wow, that was an amazing match. I mean, I probably couldn't have predicted that kind of ending right there. I mean, the Lightning definitely clutched in, killed a lot of those heavy-hitting troops there at the end side. And it looked like, he was going to win, but he kind of just turned around at the end and took us all by surprise.
I mean, just having that spam ready. I mean, we'll have a little bit more look of it in depth as we talk. It's obviously having that spam available. You've got the Ram Rider as sort of a backup, but Felipe with a more expensive deck, slightly more expensive on the 4 card. I mean, damage speaks though. We saw a lot more from Felipe in that matchup. Default had a great defensive game, yes, but having that backup avenue with the Ram Rider as a tower-focused card, I mean, do you think that Ram Rider was secretly the win condition in that deck? Because the P.E.K.K.A, all he really did was deal with the tanks.
Yeah, I mean, the Ram Rider kind of just sneaked in past all of that, party that was happening at the bridge, and just managed to sneak all past that and just get to the tower. And I think there was just a lot going on for the players to be able to count everything, and you just make sure and try and get value from every single one when the Elixir is coming at double speed as well. So it's definitely a bit of a reaction game there at the bridge.
Yeah, I mean, it's like that old strategy. You got that much going on, you put the Hog Rider under the minion horde and people don't know it's there type thing. It's you sort of get lost in the sauce a little bit when that much is going on. But it was really just a stalemate on that left bridge. There was just so many cards of equal HP, equal damage output for both players at the same time that were just constantly clashing. I mean, we didn't see, again, the Giant Skeleton make any sort of connection whatsoever on the tower from both players now. The Royal Giant was definitely a big point of call there for Default, but unfortunately, he just couldn't get that last 2 shots off to find the tower. I mean, the P.E.K.K.A did really come in huge at just completely wiping that left lane out.
Yeah, I mean, Default tried to play a little bit of mind games running the same deck that Felipe ran, but it doesn't seem to have worked in this case. But I wouldn't say it was a bad choice. It was pretty close, I would say, at the end. But it was just a matter of who would just count the elixirs, and maybe even a little bit of luck played in that as well. So what kind of decks do we expect to see in the next matchup? We saw a Bridge Spam being used, and Giant Skeleton, and, Royal Giant. We've got, Hog left, Mortar left as well, and other like Lumballoons and those kind of decks are left for these guys in the current meta, or unless if they want to go off meta.
Well, I mean, we still have Skeleton King yet to be played, who has had such a massive impact on the early stages of this tournament. So whether or not he makes a return, we've got the Electro Giant, given his stature at the moment. So both players still have some pretty big hitting things available. There you go, Felipe really teasing already off the bat. Lava Hound in the back. It is going to be the drill on the left side. So Lava Loon for Felipe, I would imagine, and then more of a Goblin Drill spam type deck for Default, maybe paired with the Hog, something like that. The Inferno Tower, what a great counter. Default already looking really good with these counters so far.
Yeah, we do see that Inferno Tower coming in, but Felipe has been running the Zap as well as the Skeleton Dragons so far. So it just goes to see what other cards Default is running. But we do see that Felipe is slightly behind on Elixir, so we might get a little bit of Goblin Drill probably at the bridge, on the tower, while the Dart Goblin comes at the bridge.
There you go. It is going to be the Skeleton King deck this time. He is going to be able to get that summon off as well just before he goes down. So there's going to be big damage on the left side. Felipe, nothing to deal with it other than the minion. He's got no elixir. That left tower falls very quickly. Default takes a very, very early lead in game number 3, but this is where the cost comes down. If you play that Lava Hound, Default reads into it, has the elixir advantage, and just lets it rip on that left side. Takes the tower. Felipe now has to play catch up.
Yeah, I mean, once Felipe played that Lava Hound in that first play, Default kind of already had a little bit of an inkling as to what his future cycle might be, so he just kind of took the advantage and just played the right cards at the right time. But we do see now a Lava Hound and a Mini P.E.K.K.A coming at the bridge, which is going to be defended by the Skeleton army, and we've got a little bit of a back and forth being played by the P.E.K.K.A and the Wall Breakers, with the Wall Breakers making it to the right-hand side of the tower.
Perfect kite there from Default with the Wall Breakers, but unfortunately it is not going to come to too much of avail. The Skeleton King was there, but the Fireball, the star of the show, had to cycle it back through and manages to defend that. The full Lava Hound, the Mini P.E.K.K.A, everything coming down that right side just completely washed off the ball. We didn't see the Inferno Tower, interestingly enough, from Default, but there we go. It is going to come out this time as a big push comes down the right once more. Connect is there with the arrows on the prediction, and even still, Astro Default on this defense is amazing right now.
Yeah, I mean, Default is just eating everything that Felipe is throwing at him with that Fireball, just kind of waiting until the pups have split open, and then just using the Fireball and the Snowball for the pushback, along with the Inferno Tower as well. It doesn't look like Felipe is going to manage to break through there, and it looks like it's going to be Default for the win.
No celebrations on the cam. Come on, get excited. You've just took the dub. We've got the second game going in favor of Default. So ultimately walking away with with that game in his favor. 2-1. It did go all 3. Felipe did have a little bit of a spark in the mid game there, but unfortunately not his night.
Yeah, as I said from the beginning, I think Default might be the one to look out for. I mean, he's beaten some pretty big names so far, and we look like, coming to the match stats, we see that the Default had slightly less elixir than Felipe, and the 4-card cycle pretty much the same, so it would just goes to show the matchups that these two players had would give one the advantage over the other.
Yeah, it was a really good game. I mean, a good way to start the night off as well. We didn't see anything really too in meta for that we have seen so far. I mean, speaking of what we've seen meta-wise, let's have a look at a little refresher of the decks that we saw throughout the games. I mean, game number 1, nothing really out in the ordinary other than Default sort of sticking to that minor poison cycle, but Felipe definitely picking more of a common combo with the Giant Skeleton and the Royal Giant.
Yeah, I mean, we see Default running that deck right there with Minor Poison. I would have thought that he would have run Water in, but in this case, it looked like it was just a very cheap deck, and it did manage to get him that win. So let's have a look at the second set of decks that we had from these players. And we see a P.E.K.K.A Bridge Spam being run by Felipe with the Lightning in place instead of the usual Fireball or Poison, with Default kind of switching things up and trying to go for a little bit of those mind games.
Yeah, just completely copying the deck previous makes things interesting. But there you go. We had our more on-meta pick, I guess, from default with a couple of small changes. The Skeleton King. We didn't have the Graveyard. We had the Goblin Drill as more of that initiator, I guess we could say. But Felipe didn't have the Loon. So it was the Lava, but no Loon in that combo. So maybe that could have been the reason we didn't see something go on there. But, I mean, the deck, aside from that, was really, really good. But regardless, default, at the end of the day, is going to walk out on top with the dub.
Yeah, I mean, running that, Loon deck, the Lava Hound deck without the Loon, could that have probably made a little bit of difference if he would have ran that Loon? I mean, we would have that Inferno Tower still over there, but it probably would have been a better chance for him in this case. Didn't really pay off in this time.
Yeah, look, either way, it didn't pan out, unfortunately, but we are going to go on to game number 2. We're not going to stop too much. We're going to get right into it. Fitchy versus Zulnino, 2 of our big hitters, I would say. Zulnino, as you mentioned, already we've said that he looks to be a little bit of an underdog coming into this, but Fitchy, given his first couple of weeks' performances, is definitely a player I would be scared of.
Yeah, I mean, Fitchy with that first seed against the 11th seed Zulnino, it's definitely going to be an interesting matchup to see. We've seen quite a lot of variety and versatility from Zulnino, and but Fitchy is probably going to, is he going to stick to his core decks and beat Zulnino up, or is Zulnino going to expand a little bit more and bring some of those surprise decks and maybe some off-meta decks in this matchup? We'll yet to see.
Yeah, broadening horizons could definitely be a possibility for Zulnino. As you said, a very versatile player, has multiple archetypes that he is somewhat proficient with. Fitchy, though, definitely tends to sort of stay more towards those heavy-hitting style of decks. I mean, week 1 against Bayern, we saw him bring out the E-Wiz. It was the first E-Wiz that we saw, so I guess we're going to find out momentarily if that is the case or not. Fitchy with the player cam once more. Zulnino, unfortunately, not able to get that one going, so we're going to hopefully see some good reactions. Fitchy with the giggles there. But what decks are you thinking for game number 1?
Yeah, I mean, Fitchy, he has ran the E-Giant Mirror in the past, along with Royal Giant and Queen and Giant Skeleton as well, and some Mortar and Skelly King and Miner as well. So some really on-meta decks, with Zulnino really showing a difference in skills that we had back there. So we see a Mother Witch coming in the back and a Cannon Cart coming in from Zulnino. Is probably going to be a stalemate at the bridge, and we're going to see the Goblin Giant coming in from Fitchy, and on defense we see a Flying Machine and a Queen as well, but no activation of the Queen's ability just yet.
Yeah, unfortunately the Queen not going to, well, I say unfortunately, fortunately rather, Queen's not going to activate the cloak just yet, but now she will, to deal with these zappies as quick as possible, maybe even get some hits off on the tower. It will indeed get 3 before being taken down by the Golden Knight. Mini Pecker as well to come across, but the Loon and the Lumber not going to connect. The Rage spell there, the Mini Pecker's on, 1, 2, 3, that's tower. Quite easily for Fitchy, but Zulnino actually on the other side of the board, trading as well with the balloon. But look at the damage, half the King Tower gone. No answer for Zulnino, who concedes a lot of damage. Fitchy read into that perfectly.
Wow, that was a very spontaneous set of cards we had at the bridge, with the Rage being played by both of these players as well. And we see that even though both players lost a tower, we see less than half health left on Zulnino's King Tower. But looks like Fitchy is going to go on the right-hand side now, a little bit more safer, and try and get the right-hand side tower for now.
Zulnino changing up the meta, I believe one of the first decks we have seen, if not the first deck that we have seen with a spawner in it, coming into the final day of stage 1. But a big push right now on the right side, the Sparky there, everything available, but the Mega Knight to come out late in this matchup. Sparky will be able to deal with it in 2, not going to get the 3rd off though to clean up what's coming down the right lane. But in saying so, Fitchy has done huge damage to the King Tower, might look to go for it depending on what's going on here, but with the Mother Witch there, the Golden Knight as well, it is just going to be a push straight back down that right side.
Yeah, and we see that GK's ability being used to kind of chain his way to the tower from all those spawners. And it looks like Mother Witch is going to take the right-hand side tower. Yeah. So we are left with only 5 seconds left, and it looks like Fitchy is going to take the win, and probably a bit safer than going for that King Tower right there.
Yeah, good choices being made by Fitchy. Ultimately, that's why we talk about the game. We don't play it because we wouldn't make good choices. We'll be Astro. We're not the professionals. But you leave the job to men like Fitchy, and he gets it done. I mean, an insane game from him for game number 1. I mean, that trade of towers at the start with the balloon and the lumberjack, with the golden knight and the mini pecker. Both players sort of having somewhat of a rage spell. Obviously, the lumberjack, and then the rage spell as its own entity. But I mean, you look at the damage: 8,000, almost 9 for Fitchy compared to Zolnino's 3,000. The cycle a lot more expensive on Zolnino's end, as well as just the average cost overall.
Yeah, Zolnino really trying to opt in for that off-meta deck with the hut, and we've got the balloon and everything else going on in there. But Fitchy wasn't really fazed by that, and he would just manage to kind of get through all of that there and manage to get the most tower damage there. And we managed to see a little bit of fun action in the beginning at the bridge as well.
Well, speaking of action, you would have missed it if you didn't have a great headset. Speaking of great headsets, Roccat feel the impact with the Vulcan 122 keyboard as well as all their headsets. But it is the best keyboard Roccat has ever built, hands down. Available now in all of your local stores and online as well. But speaking of everything in regards to all that, get some Roccat. You can tell that Fitchy uses Roccat on the regular, but that was a really good deck. Speaking of Zul's deck, it was a little bit interesting with the hut and everything there, but he's not going to be able to use it again, given that that's how the tournament works. Into game number 2, no messing around. Very quickly into the second, some head scratching going on, and a goblin barrel shown early here from Fitchy, so a little bit more cycles, it seems, from him in this second game.
Yeah, we see the miner coming in on the right-hand side with the bomber, but we do see a first appearance of that mighty miner in tonight's tournament show, and we see a musketeer trying to come in for that, but Fitchy opts in for a very negative elixir trade rocket right there, but is it going to be beneficial to him in this case? And we see a mortar coming down as well on the right-hand side by Zolnino, which will be defended by a cannon in place in the center by Fitchy in this case.
And that Zappy on the left will actually get one. The Dark Goblin's going to have to be drawn out to deal with this mortar as the Mini Pecker makes his way on down, paired with the Bomber. But this Dark Goblin putting in the yards for Fitchy right now. So much cleaned up. The mortar, the Mini Pecker, and the Bomber dealt with there by that one Dark Goblin. So that is an insane elixir trade on Fitchy's side of the field. But Zolnino saving up now, has the lead. What is he going to do with it? Miner to come out, does he pair it with the mortar? No, nothing in tow, just the miner for some damage. The mighty miner will come out to counter. Fitchy really just sort of rolling with the punches on this one so far.
Yeah, Zolnino hasn't really showed any spells so far, but we see that Goblin Barrel coming in on the right side, and there we go, we've got a Barbarian Barrel, and we've got a mirror from Fitchy as well, and a Barbarian Barrel I don't think is able to take out a level 13 Goblin Barrel there, so it'll be all down to Zolnino's last spell, and with that mirror involved in there, we might be able to see some interesting gameplays and matchups as we head into double elixir time in about 2 seconds.
As we go on, over 60 seconds remain. The Dark Goblin once more putting in massive work on that right side. A bit of a counter push coming in on that right lane once more. The Mighty Miner to deal with the Musketeer at the bridge and then make his way forward. But the Goblin Barrel first to come. It's going to draw out the Barb Barrel. Will he follow it up with the Mirror? Yes, he will. Straight back onto that tower with 3 more Goblins. They are going to connect for 2 hits. One of which will get 2 hits, rather, should we say. Log once more to deal with everything else, but the cannon at the bridge, aggressive, but it deals with the issue to the case and gets some shots off on everything else coming up behind. Fitchy right now is having a Lemons-esque performance on this defense.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that mirror Goblin Barrel that we had there, even the Bomber is not able to one-shot those Goblins, so Fitchy can definitely take some of those shots right there. We see a Barbarian Barrel being drawn out from Zolnino, and Fitchy can use the little trick that we have there. If you are not a very active Clash Royale players, you can play a champion and then use the mirror again to play the previous card that we had there, which might make for some unpredictable matchups that we have. And now we see the final spell being played by Zolnino, which is the Poison. But in this case, we see Fitchy is probably just going to cycle his rockets and the Goblin Barrels, probably for the win. What do you think, Frodo?
Yeah, probably the safe bet for Fitchy. He wants to lock it out in Regulation 2 here. If he can, that miner's going to do its best to try and chip away at some more of that damage, but having the Goblin Barrel in tow with the cycle as well as the mirror available if the option is wanting to be played, which indeed it is. I mean, as you said, that bomber just doesn't unfortunately do anything, and there it is. It's actually the Goblin Barrel to finish it off. Good games as well from Fitchy. Definitely looks comfortable with taking that one in his stride, as that was a fast 2-0 as comparative to our first game. So Fitchy definitely upping the ante a little bit here.
Yeah, it was really unlucky and unfortunate by Zolnino. I mean, he ran that Barbarian Barrel and Poison, but unfortunately no log and no mirror by him as well. So wasn't really able to defend that second Goblin Barrel. But let's have a look at the match stats. We see a slightly lower elixir run by Fitchy and slightly more tower damage by Fitchy in this case.
Yeah, Zolnino opting for more of the expensive options tonight, and I don't know, given how it sort of panned out, could have been the downfall. Didn't really stick to his guns. I mean, we saw that, I want to say questionable deck from the start. I mean, it was a mix of three. We had the Mega Knight, sorry, as the tank. Then we had a spawner deck going. I mean, let's have a look exactly what that deck was a little bit more in depth. I mean, there you go. It's the Mega Knight. We had the spawner. We had the Lumberloon. I mean, it was really four decks just sort of mismatched into one, and based on the score, I mean, we saw how that one panned out.
Yeah, we do see a lot of off-meta decks being run by Zolnino with a mishmash of a lot of win conditions, but Fitchy just sticking strong to his core and running that Goblin Giant Sparky with the P.E.K.K.A. also. But let's take a look at the second deck that these players ran, and we see that Zolnino just ran for something, a little bit of the off-meta with Minor Poison with the Mortar that we had a couple of metas ago, but Fitchy running the very popular Mirror Goblin Barrel.
Yeah, I mean, we spoke about how good the Poison was played in game one by default, but then you look at game two, that was more of what we were getting at when we said that the Poison just isn't cycled enough with that Miner, because there was just nothing available in terms of damage being dealt by that Poison. We only saw it used once at the bridge to deal with anything. But I mean, final thoughts for that game, Astro. I mean, what are you thinking we're expecting from these players going forward now?
Yeah, I mean, from an entertainment value, that Mirror Goblin Barrel is really fun to see, you know, whether he can get on those mirrors right there, and whether to see whether the opponent has any counters for that as well. But we'll probably see some more on-meta decks, I would say, by Fitchy. But it'll be interesting to see what some of our other players will be playing in tonight's matches as well.
Well, you heard it here first from the man. We are going to head to our first break of the evening. We won't be gone too long, so don't go anywhere. We will return momentarily with some more Clash.
My world is my storytelling.
My world is diverse. Our world.
My world is astrophysics. It's always been a dream of mine.
I don't know what my career pathway will be.
I approach architecture from the point of view of my culture.
I want to contribute to my people.
It's a way I can give back. I want to change the perception of engineers.
I want to take my tohu home when I graduate.
Right now, it's about me.
And this is my chapter.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the short break. We are here, but before we continue, let's speak about something that is going to be very, very cool that you might want to check out. Fasten your seatbelts for a spin around the Sky Tower with their new VR experience, Sky Slide. Purchase your tickets online and use our promo code LPL Slide to get 10% off your Skyline bundles until the 30th of August. For more info, use !Sky Slide in the chat. And I mean, you best be getting on that because I'd imagine people are going to be getting on that one pretty quickly because it sounds pretty cool. But Asher, I mean, we saw some pretty interesting games for Game 1 and 2. So coming into the remainder of the games tonight, I mean, are we expecting some more spice or a little bit more safety from these plays?
Yeah, I mean, we're going to probably see that upper bracket matchup as well with the final matchup. So I'd say some very intense matchups to be expected in the final part of this tournament tonight. So, but Zilnino kind of unfortunately went out in the previous matches with his off-meta decks. But I'll probably predict that we'll see more on-meta decks with maybe 1 or 2 cards being switched out for that surprise factor.
Yes, well, unfortunately, we're not going to see too much of game number 3, given that Default has had to step away for the night. So it is going to be an FF, and Fitchy will move on through by, funnily enough, Default, with the win from that one. So we're going to be heading straight on into our 4th match of the evening, skipping over the 3rd. And what a better way to kick it off with our upper bracket matchup, Lemons versus Professor Live.
Yeah, I mean, we see Professor Live with that 2nd seed, but don't be deterred by Lemon's 9th seed because he has a much higher win rate. We saw 1 loss from him last week, but he still takes off that number 1 spot right there. But from 2 people who have not really lost a matchup so far, it's really anyone's game here tonight.
Yeah, both of these players bringing big things to the upper bracket side. Obviously, Lemons, we've sort of dubbed him as the best defensive player in the LPL Clash Cup so far. I mean, up until last week, he was 100% win rate, undefeated regardless. And he still technically is undefeated, but unfortunately, percentage-wise, he has lost one of those best of 3s. One of the games, rather, in those best of 3s. He does have the play cams. He returns the king of cycle, we could even say. So I'd be interested to see whether or not it's going to be the hog or the goblin barrels from him tonight.
Yeah, so we see that Mother Witch coming there on the left-hand side and also some wall breakers on the right-hand side trying to make it to the tower, but Professor Lives opts in for that negative elixir trade with that arrows right there. And we're probably expecting some faster cycle with that bats and wall breakers and miner and a lot of other stuff. But Professor Live, I'm probably guessing he might be running E-Golem. What do you think, Proto?
Could be. I mean, it definitely could be the E-Wiz, the E-Giant rather, but Lemons, he's just sticking to what he's good at. He's got the cycle with the Prince thrown into the mix, so the Prince miner deck, but with the cannon there. The Rage, though, look at all these troops coming from Professor Live on this left side. Looking good to connect if they can make it just that little bit further. The Electro Dragon putting in big work. The healer as well, keeping those troops alive. But Nonans, the king of defense. We've said it multiple times. Once more, showing us why he has that name. Damage being traded back on that left side. And I mean, what a way to counter push on that left lane.
Yeah, I mean, we see some huge amount of damage being taken by Professor Live with only 1321 health left. And we see a lot of spammy troops by Lemons, but not so much spammy troops by Professor Live with that E-Golem healer coming in. But we do see that final card being played, Mega Knight, now coming at the bridge. Professor Live has used his E-Buff, so which is out of cycle, but he's going to defend that with a healer. And we see some bats and some rage being activated for some defense, which is unfortunately not going to be enough for Professor Live.
Not enough at all. Lemons connects with the mighty jump there from the Mega Knight. And unfortunately, it's not what you want. But the Electro Dragon on the right side to counter the Prince here with the miner in tow. But getting the zap down, is this going to be a timing or is the Prince going to connect? Indeed he will with the charge. The Wall Breaker's on the left. Going to deal some good damage damage actually take as the Prince goes to work on the right. The E-Golem now coming down the right side, but a big counter push once more for Professor Live. The Rage Spell as well to send it all on through. Lemons is going to have his work cut out from here as a lot starts connecting to the tower, but it comes to the Mega Knight to drop down. The damage is just compounding. The tower falls in quick succession. The E-Golem once more. Lemons has to defend here, but he goes for the push. He looks in tower, but no, it's not going to happen. He drops the PM and the 3 crown. Professor Live. A little bit of a misplay from Lemons. It looked so good up until that last push. He just couldn't make it happen.
Wow, that was some crazy matchups at the end. We saw so much action going on right at the very last minute of that game. We see, of course, that 3 crown normally expected by an E-Golem healer kind of deck, but it didn't look like it was going to happen in this time, but we did see it in this case happening.
I'm super surprised that that one happened. I mean, the breakdown will help us sort of identify what went wrong. I mean, it was slightly cheaper from Professor Live, but he got the full 10,000 damage to take the dub. Lemons, slightly more expensive, but was arguably playing that match a lot better than what we saw from Professor Live in the open minutes. It came down to that last few seconds remaining, and then Professor Live just stacked up that right lane, took it all the way to the King Tower with a 1 push, and Lemons just could not defend it. I don't know if it's because the cards that were in cycle maybe weren't the right ones. I mean, he had the Mega Knight, but it was just absolutely smashed by everything available. We had the Inferno Dragon, the Electro Dragon. I mean, everything there was just shutting that down completely, and the defense had no chance.
Yeah, there was not enough being played by him in this case, but we did see that E-Golem really be shining in that double elixir mode, and then at the end we just saw him just envelop all those towers right there and take the 3 crown, but it was slightly harder for that Mega Knight deck to even get 1 crown, but much easier for him to get 3 crowns.
Regardless, all those cards now gone. Lemon's going to come into this with a bit of a mental chalk, I guess we could say, off the back of that unfortunate loss. We're looking really, really good, but then, yeah, 3 crown just converged. Professor Live did really well. So Lemons has defaulted back to the Goblin Barrel deck that we've seen him play multiple times. They're going to get a lot of hits on that left side. So a good start, but Professor Live definitely has the momentum coming into this one.
Yeah, a little bit of BM there from Professor Live, but we see that Lemon's probably going to be running the Rascals version of the Lockbait, or with a mirror as well on the right-hand side. So once again, entertainment value for our viewers, with a mirror being played, always a fun card to see. But we do have some very quick cycle cards by Professor Live, and it looks like Lemon's going to get a little bit of chip damage on the left-hand side, while there's not much damage on Lemon's tower.
Yeah, Professor Live definitely looking a little bit worse for wear with damage, but it is going to be Lemons to get the Skeleton King on the board here. So I'd imagine we will be expecting to see either the Graveyard and the Skeleton Army. No, it is going to be the Skeleton Balloon, possibly with the Graveyard / Skeleton Army as well to charge him up. But even in saying that, you don't need either of those to have the Skeleton King able to be played. I mean, you've got the Goblin Barrel, you have the Dark Goblin that takes not too much to get rid of. But there you go, it is going to be the Skeleton Army. Deals with the Hog Rider greatly. The Queen as well is going to have to activate the Cloak to get rid of what's left of that Skeleton Army. But no, it's actually not, unfortunately, going to get rid of it at all. And Lemons is going to walk away with both the damage and the upper trade there with the Elixir advantage now.
Yeah, it looks like Professor Live only has a log to deal with the Goblin Barrel and the Mirror and the Dark Goblin and everything else. So one card can't really be played 4 times in a row, unfortunately. So Professor Live is probably going to have to think of something else, like using the Valkyrie around the Goblin Barrel just as it drops, and really time his cycle right so that he's able to get the most out of this defense. But it looks like Lemon's going to have a slightly easier time this round with the Goblin Barrel coming there on the left-hand side, managing to get a little bit of chip damage, while the Rascals are going to be engaged on the right-hand side tower, with the Queen's ability being used on the left-hand side as well, and the log coming in and sweeping all of that up at the bridge, ending in a little bit of stalemate.
Yeah, still some good damage though from Lemons, and well, with the Earthquake there, Lemons times it perfectly on the drop. Will get rid of the Hog Rider before he does too much damage as the Skeleton Army makes its way on the left. No Skeleton King, though, there to be able to be charged up. So the Rascal's actually doing some big work as well on that right side. The Skeleton Balloon paired with the Goblin Barrel, though, is going to be the main focus, but unfortunately dealt with by the log means that Lemons isn't going to get any damage. And Professor Live is actually going to take the dub on that counter push with the Hog Rider there by his Lonesome. But now coming down that left side, a lot of cards in play for Lemons. Professor Live once more just there to clean it all up with the Valkyrie.
Yeah, and we do see that defensive, offensive slash skeleton barrel there with the mirror dart goblin managing to just get a little bit of chip damage on the tower and also on the cannon without being targeted by the cannon. And now we see the Rascals coming in from the behind with Queen being placed in front. I'm probably guessing the ability being used right now. Yep, and probably a Valkyrie to come up there at the bridge to take out some of these troops. And I'm guessing a cannon and then another log. But it was still a good defense.
I don't even know what took out that Goblin Barrel. All of them died with perfect placement, and the log wasn't even played. It was the skeletons there, but I mean, Professor Live, a great defense from him, didn't really concede too much damage, but with a minute left in overtime, it's really anybody's game. We haven't seen that hog maybe as much as we should be here from Professor Live, but Lemons has been doing really well at keeping it at bay when it is in play. So if you can keep that up and just keep getting these chip damage plays in to find damage, I believe it was the Fire Spirit that time. I mean, he could be good here to take this. He's going to get 2 stabs with that Goblin in the back. So down to 800 now, Professor Live's going to have to go huge.
Yeah, I mean, we do see that Fireball right there in cycle as well. So if he can get it down enough, he can probably do a little bit of a Fireball mirror, but we do need to see a little bit more of those Goblin Barrels getting hit on the tower, but we do see the Fire Spirit not being enough to take all of the Goblin Barrels out, and we see a lot of spam on the bridge with 400 damage left, which probably should be enough for a Fireball and Mirror Fireball, but Lemon's going to be opting in for a little bit more of a pressure push.
Yeah, there you go. Fireball in the end is not quite enough, but the mirror in tow for Lemons to close out game number 2. So he's a little bit more happy. We see the smirk creeping onto his face there at the end of that second match. So he's definitely a little bit more happy with the outcome there as opposed to the first. But I mean, statistically speaking, he had a little bit more of a chance this time. I mean, we take a little bit more of a look at it. Obviously, he's got a lot available in terms of his cycle. Yes, it was slightly more expensive, but ultimately that type of deck is one that we have seen him succeed with on multiple occasions. The amount of damage he can deal, the cycle that he can achieve, when he gets in the rhythm of it, it's pretty hard to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, we see the much faster four-card cycle by Professor Live there, but he just, and we see 2 powerhouses kind of coming in with, really big expectations of themselves. They've won every single match up so far, so why not just one more match and just win up today's one? But we do see a 1-1 draw so far, so it'll be really intense, fired-up matches for this last round. What do you think, Proto?
Well, I mean, it's a best of 3, so we do still have 1 more left to go as the players get ready. I mean, deck predictions, I definitely think we could see the hog sort of EQ maybe from Lemons. It's something he likes, the cycle style. He's very, very comfortable with it, and it is something that I'd imagine he will stick to going forward into this last game. But I mean, you look at the other side of the card, maybe a bit more of a tank sort of play, something a bit more aggressive, maybe even from Professor Live, Lumballoon, along the lines of. What are you thinking, Astro?
Yeah, so I mean, we still have yet to see that recruits pick from a Lemon, so that is something he might run, or if he is probably going to surprise Professor Live a little bit. And also, Professor Live last week also had run recruit picks, so we might see maybe recruits a prediction, or maybe even an E-Giant in this case. As we see now, both players, good luck to each other and just leaking up the elixir until one of them makes the first move.
First move or first mistake is really the call of what it is, but Professor Live to kick it off. It's going to be Fitchy to answer very quickly. The Goblin Drill back, the Golden Knight there to deal with it. A lot of damage taken though, so I mean the drill does succeed in dealing damage, I guess, to the Golden Knight himself, but Lemons is actually going to concede more than he deals on this left side here as the Bandit cleans up what's left of the Golden Knight. So Professor Live currently in the lead with the Cade there on the defense. So far, Professor Live with a pretty interesting build-up.
Yeah, so we see that Drill making another appearance in tonight's matchup, and we see also that Bandit. So we're kind of aiming for a little bit of a Bridge spam, and with that Goblin Drill in there, you see the Golden Knight's ability and managing to dash to that tower right there, but not being able to get anything more. But we do see the Baby Dragon and the other Golden Knight actually been going ham on the tower, and Professor Live with a little bit of insult on injury, salt on the wounds.
Yeah, BM, you love to see it. Lemons doesn't. Unfortunately, that's not the greatest outcome, but with the Tornado to activate the King Tower as well, the good luck. I mean, it is just mind games right now from Professor Live. The deck that he is bringing at the moment, completely outclassing what Lemons has available to him. I mean, he still has 3 cards hidden. Could be sort of indicating of what the deck is. I mean, we could see the Royal Giant still yet to come out. We could see the Balloon Lumberjack. It could even be a Hog deck. But now that we go into Double Elixir, I'd imagine those 3 cards are going to show themselves.
Yeah, we do see a lot of damage on the left side on Lemons, so 782 left with only 2150. So Lemons really has to get in some more of those drills into the tower. But is he hiding spells, or is he hiding maybe another win condition? And there we finally see the E-Giant being played by the Professor Live. And with the Inferno Tower there, it's probably going to clean it up in this case.
Yeah, Lightning as well means that E-Giant necessarily won't get to the tower, but damage dealt, all of those cards taken out. I mean, just the sheer amount of trade positives for Professor Live right now. Lemon's taking so much damage. Unfortunately, with the Lightning available, it's only going to take a cycle here for Professor Live to get that back into his hand. 6 Elixir is all is going to be the difference between finishing this game, and there you go. It won't even actually be the Lightning spell that makes it. It's going to be the Golden Knight, Professor Live, to walk away with the victory 2-1 in rather spectacular fashion. Our first E-Giant for the evening. I mean, the E-Giant didn't really do too much, but still a dub nonetheless with him in the deck.
Yeah, I mean, if I see an E-Giant on the ladder coming against me, I'll probably be a little bit intimidated as well. But with that Lightning, he didn't really have much chance in that case. So let's take a look at what these players ran and break down a little bit of their matchup. So we see a much cheaper deck running from Lemons, but Professor Live with that slightly heavier deck and more tower damage.
Yeah, I think having that low cost there sort of hurt Lemons. He didn't have any real beefy troops, and then when it came to the business end of things, he didn't really have anything available to deal with things like that E-Giant. I mean, he had the Inferno Tower, yes, but we didn't see that until yonks into the matchup. And I mean, we look back at the previous decks played by both of these players, and it is sort of highlighting as to how Professor Live managed to walk away with it. I mean, we talked about it, that E-Golem healer at the moment is one of the more stronger sort of combos with the E-Barbs especially, but having that Inferno Dragon and the E-Dragon in the mix just completely thwarted the Mega Knight.
Yeah, that was a very interesting matchup, but that not something that we were expecting. But in the second match, we do see that mirror being played, and with the Goblin Barrel in there, Professor Live just wasn't able to crack through with just that log being over there. But we do see a lot of log baiting kind of troops like the Skeleton Barrel as well, and with the Mirror Fireball, it just wasn't enough for him.
Yeah, and then obviously for game number 3, I mean, Lemons, not a deck that we've seen him play, or at least a combination of cards that we've seen him play recently, whereas deck number 2 was definitely something more stronger for him, at least his strongest type of deck. Professor Live having that E-Giant, having that Lightning spell, all of that available was just there to completely counter it out. I mean, the fact that it was so cheap just meant that it was so quick to just deal with everything that was bought by Lemons. And unfortunately for Lemons, that means that he didn't walk away with the dub. So 2-1 to Professor Live, but it still managed to go all 3 maps. So you do have to give Lemons that at least.
Yeah, I mean, Lemons getting his second loss for the tournament tonight, so win rate probably going to drop slightly there. But Professor Live, you know, probably if I was him, I'd probably be very confident right now heading to that very, very final match, which will be at the end of the night.
Yeah, we've got some more matches to look forward to, though. Speaking of next matches, we have one more coming up for our next match. It is going to be Lemons once more, taking on our first seed, Fitchy. Trophies, relatively similar, but win rate now after his recent losses, Fitchy is looking a little bit better to Lemons, unfortunately.
Yeah, we do see that number 1 seed versus that number 9 seed right there, with Lemon's win rate slightly dipping below, and Fitchy, even though, you know, their ladder trophies are more or less the same, I'd probably say, you know, Lemons is a little bit more fired up after, you know, losing their previous matchup. So he's probably going to be focused in, zoned in, and probably going to make less mistakes and probably slightly better deck choices.
Yeah, look, he's probably going to bust out a lot more what he's comfortable with. He obviously showed more of his, I would say, strongest deck in game number 2. So I'd imagine we might even see that off the bat here for game 1. But if Fitchy sort of reads into it, which I'd imagine he will, he's most likely going to be counter-stratting, counter-decking, sort of thinking that that is going to be what Lemons is going to be trying to do, given that he has probably just watched how that match panned out coming into it. So I'd imagine Fitchy might be looking to play a very similar style, bring a little bit more on the expensive end, and look to deal that damage where he can and take it as it comes, because Lemons is going to be looking to play super aggro out of the gate. Given the recent loss, he wants to sort of just get back into the frame of it, start taking names.
Yeah, he definitely wants to redeem himself in this matchup right here, which is going to be coming up shortly. But we do see, Fitchy running some on-meta decks recently. So is he going to double down on those ones? Because, you know, when we have these clan war kind of formats, it's very hard to change decks last minute. Normally you have a set of decks that you already have prepared, and you can only change 1 or 2 cards right there to try and counteract the enemy. But given what the versatility that Lemons is playing, I think it's going to be anyone's game for the next one. What do you think, Frodo?
I mean, yeah, Lemons has looked really good up until tonight. Unfortunately, that matchup previous just was not his game. But Fitchy returning after his game moments ago. Lemons as well after the previous. Both of these people coming in here looking to take the dub, both of them. Scary names. I mean, Fitchy, in our first week, we said that he was looking like he was going to be one of our most aggressive players. So we'll see if he can keep that up, as Lemons showing the Skeleton Barrel and the Dark Goblin on that right side.
Yeah, we see some damage being taken by Lemons there from those Skeleton Dragons, with 2730 on the right-hand side. The Goblin Barrel coming in, being defended by guards. Obviously, it won't be able to surround completely, so we will see some extra damage. And we see a Skeleton Army coming right there to defend off against the Inferno Dragon as well, with the Skeleton King charging up his ability, soaking up all those dead skeletons. So now we see a Skeleton King versus Skeleton King, with slightly, the Skeleton Barrel coming on the left-hand side, distracting attention from Fitchy, and it looks like he's going to get a lot of damage there on the left-hand side, with the champion ability coming to a bit of a stalemate there.
Yeah, a lot of damage indeed, but I mean, Lemons, we said it, he's already showing his best deck, or one of, in this match. In match number 1, it is going to be the Mirror Rascals for their defense. Obviously, the 2 Rascal girls at the back are going to be able to deal with their slingshots to some degree. The Lava Hound is going to have to be the Dark Goblin cycle to complete things up, but still, you look at that left side, Fitchy has taken a lot of damage, and considering what Lemons has achieved so far, this is a lot much more of a better start for him.
Yeah, and also we see the Rascal Girls and the Goblin, the Dart Goblin right there, being only 2 shots, 2 of the air counters that Lemons had there. But we see the Skeleton Kings coming into the bridge once again, with the arrows coming and finishing it up. But we see the Goblin Barrel coming in, surrounding the tower, but managing to get a little bit of damage there as well. So can he get a little bit more of those cycled Goblin Barrels, or is he going to allow Fitchy to get the Lava Hound down?
That is big, letting that Lava Hound. It's going to mean that that tower most likely is going to fall, and Lemons is going to be happy with that outcome, but has to now deal with the Lava Hound and the Bone Dragons coming down that left side with the Miner as well. It is going to draw back the Rascal leader as the Skeleton King brings up the back, and damage being conceded by Lemons here. Can he defend it? The Fireball comes out. It's drawn to defense, but as 10 seconds remain, not a lot available, but a prediction arrows from Fitchy. You can see the Lemons is worried at what's happening right now. Damage from the Flying Machine. Could it keep Fitchy in it? No! 60 health available left on the board, Lemons. That was a clench for those last 10 seconds. Fitchy so close. Had those arrows done just that little bit more damage, we could have definitely seen that one continue into overtime.
Yeah, that would have been clutch right there if that, managed to get the tower with only the HP going into double digits right there, but unfortunately not enough for him. So let's take a look at the match stats we have for this first match, and Lemons opting in for that slightly cheaper deck with Fitchy running that heavier Lava Hound deck, just not being quite enough to take down all the tower.
Yeah, I mean, Fitchy did have more damage ultimately, but it's because a lot of what was going on was split between the two lanes, whereas Lemons just focused it out on that one side, got the job done with that one tower and played defense for the rest, and that is where Lemons' playstyle shines. I mean, the defense was a little bit shaky there from him in that sort of last minute, but from what we saw in week one, it is the style that he likes to play, and people have started playing into that. I mean, we've seen a lot more of an aggressive style of clash from his opponents, and I mean, that even led to the fact that he lost the previous matchup. But coming into this matchup, already leading with 1 point. Fitchy now on the back foot, so whether or not he can equalise and send us to a third, or if Lemons can close it out here, questions to be answered momentarily.
Yeah, that's right, and we see the wall breakers being split at the bridge just to kind of see what Fitchy has got going, and we see the Magic Archer coming there, not being able to come in range of that Princess Tower, but the Prince just finishing things up pretty nicely. The Zappies will defend against the Prince very nicely, and Lemons kind of shaking his head a little bit with seeing that Zappies right there. Does he think this is going to be a matchup against him?
Could be. I mean, we saw Fitchy attempt to read into it. I think he sort of had an inkling that Lemons was going to bring out his sort of pride and joy deck for that first sort of opener, but either or, it's going to be a repeat of the Mega Knight as the Skeleton Giant comes down that right side with the Golden Knight, but the Mega Giant in quick succession is going to be able to deal with that. The death damage will do a lot of damage to the Mega Minion, but the Cannon can't thwart that bridge. So Lemons isn't going to have to worry too much for the moment, but as I say that, Golden Drill to come out, Prince to counter, it's going to concede a couple of hits as the Ghost is there as well. Fitchy definitely happy with how that panned out. It might not be a lot of damage, but in the grand scheme of things, damage is damage in competitive Clash.
Yeah, and we do see that wall breakers making into that tower, doing a little bit of damage right there, evening things up at 2607 on Fitchy's right-hand side tower, with Lemons just being a little bit better with 2667. And we see here now Lemons playing a Mother Witch at the back, but we do have that Giant Skeleton and Goblin Drill as well, which is probably going to be most effective for Fitchy as we head into double elixir time.
Yeah, now coming into double elixir 2 cards, hiding for both players. Could be a lightning, could be a poison, maybe even a rocket from Lemons, but either or, that Mega Knight is going to be the big point of focus right now, doing damage with the Prince reaching over the lake. He actually vaults on over to take the fight to the Zappies. The Zap will be revealed by Lemons, so not the lightning, it's his smaller younger brother is going to be there, available. The Mother Witch to clean things up to some degree, but still a lot of troops to deal with. And as the Hog attempts to make its way over, it will not. Fitchy starting to deal some decent damage now on this right side, but Lemons showing us why he is the defense king, cleans it all up.
Yeah, that's right, and we still haven't seen the last card by Fitchy. He hasn't really shown his spell yet, if he is running a spell. A lot of heavy hitters, but so far we see, now we've got the wall breakers on the left-hand side trying to do a little bit of pressure. Fitchy just opting to ignore all of that with a lot of troops on the bridge on the right-hand side tower. If the Giant Skeleton makes it to the tower, this could spell very badly for Lemons, and we see the Goblin Drill coming in, and a good game from Lemons. It doesn't look like he can do much in this case.
Yeah, no, as the Skeleton Giant makes it on, it's not even the death damage that cleans up the tower, it will just be him punching away. So Fitchy holds on for one more game, sending us on to number 3. We've had 2 in the series so far. Lemons looked pretty good at the start of that, but then ultimately began to crack at the seams, we could say, as Fitchy made his way through. So Giant Skeleton finally having some effect. The first time it actually made it to the tower tonight, but it didn't die in the process. As we see in the costs, slightly more expensive, tends to beat out Lemons' decks. He likes those cycle styles. You bring something a little bit more tanky, something that can deal a little bit more damage. It always tends, at least so far, to take the dub over it.
Yeah, I mean, Fitchy with that slightly heavier elixir deck we have right there, but he was just able to get a lot more juice on the map, a lot more meat on the map, and just the defense from Lemon just wasn't able to be enough to manage to get any sort of counter push going, with a little bit of wall breakers on the left-hand side, getting a little bit of chip damage there, but, you know, he just kind of ignored it and just went home for it and managed to get the dub in the double elixir time. So a good matchup for him.
Yeah, decent so far. I mean, it's all 3, and I mean, we go back to topics that Genome and I discussed. We saw that in the first couple of weeks, Fitchy was definitely sort of shaping up to be the big bully of the tournament, with Lemon sort of being the defensive god on the prowess side of the defense. So it's interesting to see that both of these players have had somewhat almost character switches in the recent couple of play days. I mean, Lemons has started to sort of lose out on these games as people have cottoned onto his play style. Fitchy has sort of let off on the aggression a little bit, which has cost him a couple of times. I mean, we find him in the lower bracket. So I'm not too sure what has happened, what has changed. I mean, we did have that 1 week where we didn't have any play days, so maybe having that break in between could have been something that has sort of messed with maybe the ability of what was being bought in the first few weeks, but you can't read too much into it. At the end of the day, on game day, anything can happen.
Yeah, that's right. Lemon's confidence slightly crumbling as he lost last week's matchup as well, and a couple of matches today. So let's take a look at the final game against this guy, against these guys, and we see Lemons and Fitchy right there, and Lemon starting off with the Goblin Drill, and what do we have for defense? Queen on defense.
Either or, the Goblin Drill will get some good early damage, and the Snowball comes out as well. So a good trade for Lemons, actually walking away with a 7-4, which is going to allow him to play the Bandit here. But as the Cloak is activated, cleans up both the Skeletons and the Bandit. Isn't going to get any damage, though, if the Fire Spirit is forced. So Tombstone in the back from Fitchy. Could be highlighting a double Prince, maybe the Skeleton King, but has already been used, so it is more likely the double Prince side of things.
Yeah, we see a lot of low-cost elixir cards like the Skeleton and the Fire Spirit from Lemons, which is going to be able to being able to defend him much easier. And we see that Tombstone in the back kind of trickling those Skeletons down on the right-hand side, which just goes back to show, does he have a big tanky card apart from the Dark Prince, or is he just going to try and cycle his way to the tower? As we see a Goblin Drill coming to the right-hand side and managing the Goblins from the Drill managing to get a couple of hits on, but the Dark Prince eating that up quite nicely.
Still a few cards yet to be shown from both sides. Lemon's not really showing too much at all here on his half. The log will finally show up to clear out that right side. The Dark Prince, 3 elixir to counter for a 4 elixir card. You take those if you're Lemons. You're happy with that trade. Fitchy sort of just trickling down with the Tombstones, though. The Goblin Drill is going to make it all the way on again, but no tower damage as the Snowball once more is used to clean up the remains. So Lemons actually in the lead right now, but there you go. The Graveyard Poison combo coming out from Fitchy here on the right side. Big damage. It is going to be the log to do some cleanup, but that was a good chunk taken away by Fitchy there.
Yeah, that's right. And now we see both of their towers slightly similar in health, and we see an aggressive Graveyard being played with the Inferno Tower on defense as well. And now we've got the Fire Spirit and the Log and the Bomber kind of trying to defend off against this Graveyard. Still, some of the Skeletons in the Graveyard managing to get a couple of hits, as we see Fitchy slightly in the lead now with that poison being played there at the end.
This is what we talk about when we say perfect cycles. Fitchy almost less than 7 seconds after having the first Graveyard down has another one in play, and the amount of elixir that it costs Lemons to counter. I mean, here it is again for the 3rd time in this matchup. Look at everything being dropped. We've had the Bomber deployed, we've got the Log to come out, we've got the Inferno Tower there. The damage just keeps coming through. The Spirit as well in an attempt to shut it down, but so much damage dealt by Fitchy with that poison in tow as well is so much worth coming out on that right side. Lemons is going to have to do something pretty drastic here if he wants to turn this game around.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, we see the defense from Fitchy against that Goblin Drill. He just basically uses that as his kite, has his offense for the graveyard. So we see Lemons kind of trying to switch things up and go for that left lane pressure right there. But it doesn't look like it's going to do Lemons any favors. Will our top-seeded highest win rate player from last week manage to hold on a little bit longer, or is he going to lose in this case?
A lot of damage continuing to come out from those graveyards, but again, the cycle just being the ultimate deciding factor here for Fitchy. If he can keep up the cycle, keep the pressure on, Lemons is slowly but surely losing this matchup unless he can take one of these towers in very, very quick succession. But it is the rocket to finally come out from Lemons. It took this long in triple elixir, but it's the aggressive Inferno at the bridge, the graveyard that could be the final if not defended properly. No poison here from Fitchy, a little bit late, but it is going to come out regardless. The log to be drawn, the damage from the skeletons, 300 down from where it was previously, as the left lane is again attempted to be pushed here by Lemons, but to no avail. Fitchy on this defense is looking impeccable as the poison comes out. He just needs to whittle away the last damage on this tower, and with the poison and the snowball, he's going to be able to do just that. Lemons, unfortunately, couldn't quite make it happen, and Fitchy, in all three, full regulation, is going to take the dub 2-1 with, again, little to no reaction.
Yeah, I mean, that graveyard just managed to get so much damage on his tower and was just able to, take in so much of the, Lemons had to use his Fire Spirit and his Log and his Bomber to defend against the graveyard, and he really has to time all those three cards in perfect succession to be able to defend the graveyard completely, but he just wasn't able to do that every single time. As we see Lemons with that cheaper elixir deck not going in his favor so much this time, and Fitchy getting way more tower damage.
Yeah, I mean, Lemons just has opted to be playing Cycle every week so far, and other than the one or two times where we've maybe seen him sort of shy away from that, and it just has not really worked for him tonight. That Cycle style has been read into greatly by Fitchy here. Ultimately just counter-stratted completely. I mean, the deck comparisons for both of these players have been a big point of contestment for what has unfolded here tonight. Obviously, Fitch for game number one did really, really well, but Lemons, that was his best deck. Hands down, that was his piece de resistance. That was his bread and butter.
Yeah, we see that Mirror and that Fireball and the Goblin Barrel, Skeleton Barrel, everything coming on at Fitchy. A little bit hard to defend using the Lava Hound with the arrows only. But as we look into deck 2, Lemons opted in for the Warbreaker cycle with the Mega Knight and the Miner, with Fitchy going for that Goblin Drill and Giant Skeleton just not being enough to defend for him.
Yeah, Fitchy ultimately walking away with that going into the third. I mean, you just watched it unfold on your screen. It was relatively one-sided, I think we have to say. Fitchy just completely out-cycling him, which is funny to say because Lemons, given that he's been such a proficient cycle player all throughout this tournament up until tonight, Fitchy just out-cycled him. That is all it is. I mean, that graveyard, that poison was on the field consistently doing damage, and Lemons just couldn't deal with it. You saw the attempt from the Goblin Drill, but it was just countered every time. I mean, the lowest that he got a tower, I think it was down to 1,600, so it just wasn't enough, and it was great play from Fitchy.
Yeah, Lemons just wasn't able to crack through using those lower elixir decks, and luckily for Fitchy, he managed to beat one of the better, higher win rate players in the tournament that we've had so far. And yeah, really good night for him, and is probably going to be preparing up for that last match for tonight.
Well, speaking of last matches, we're going to get into that one shortly, but before that, we are going to head to a break. So don't go anywhere. We still have more Clash Royale coming after this short break.
My world is my storytelling.
My world is diverse. Our world.
My world is astrophysics. It's always been a dream of mine.
I don't know what my career pathway will be.
I approach architecture from the point of view of my culture.
I want to contribute to my people.
It's a way I can give back.
I want to change the perception of engineers.
I want to take my tohu home when I graduate.
Right now, it's about me.
And this is my chapter.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from the break. We spoke about the keyboard. Let's speak about the mouse. Roccat, the Burst Pro Air, a lightweight optical wireless RGB gaming mouse, is available now. Make sure you go and check it out. Get the combo. It's probably the best choice. But we saw some interesting games so far, Astro, as we come into our final match of the night. I mean, we've got it here. We're ready to go into it and have a look at what it is. Professor Live versus Fitchy, our first and second seeds, duking it out here at the end.
Yeah, I mean, seed 1, seed 2, who would have kind of guessed, when we started this tournament right here, but it ended up being ultimately the case as we see our final of the top 8 players in Australia and New Zealand being decided who's going to win this final match and get the crown.
Yeah, get the dub, get the win, walk away with, I guess, with the bragging rights for stage 1 victor. But either way, it's going to be an absolute banger of a matchup. We've seen 3rd and 4th seed tonight duke it out. Now we're going to get to see 1st and 2nd Fitchy with a slightly higher win rate given his success in the early stages of the stage. So whether or not that is any sort of telling from what we will see from him tonight to close it out, to keep that first position after the end of stage 1, a good question, but we're going to get right on into it all the same. Professor Live so far tonight has had a really good showing already. We do have his camera now finally here as well as we are in the training grounds for our final match. Fitchy, It's going to be down on Elixir off the get-go with a -1 trade on the Fire Spirit.
Yeah, I mean, we saw Fitchy running E-Giant in the last week's broadcast, and also Professor Live running the same as well. So it'll be interesting to see if we get to see more E-Giant action like was be in last time's broadcast. But no, we're going to see a Hog cycle running, being ran by Fitchy, with Queen making another appearance for the night with some 2 cheaper Elixir cycle cards that we have right there.
Yeah, look, so far the decks have been shaping up to be interesting, but it definitely seems to be a very heavily Hog cycle. Back to some of the older days of Clash, I guess we could say, with the Hog Valve, but still going to connect for a hit with the Rocket on trade as well as the Fire Spirit, so actually losing a little bit of Elixir there. Fitchy with the head scratch. I mean, look, you can't really blame him at that point. Giggles from both players. They know that it's about to get heated as the Elixir starts to gear back up. But the Expo, first appearance for the night. It will be the Inferno Tower to meet it at the bridge with the Knight paired as well. But can he deal with it with the cards available? He's going to get some damage off, and that is a perfect counter from Fitchy. A great way to deal with that Expo.
Yeah, I mean, you know, Expo being ran by Professor Live for the first time, and Fitchy just running that Hog with that Inferno Tower and the EQ and the Lock, so which is going to be a little bit of an easier matchup for Fitchy. But is Professor Live then going to resort to some defensive Expos, or we might see some more Queen action at the bridge, as we see Professor Live kind of smirking right there with the Rocket coming in and getting a little bit of damage on that Archer and the Tower as well.
Yeah, that's actually the first time Professor Live's connected so far. Fitchy really yet to concede too much, but the Earthquake perfectly placed is going to allow his Hog Rider to get on for one good swing before being taken down by the Skeletons and the Knight, as the Log comes through to deal some extra tower damage as well, to take it below 2,000. The Archers clean up what's left of the Knight. So far, pretty good. The cycle of the Rocket, though, kind of forced out here by Fitchy, which is good for him in this instance. It's going to allow him to get a lot more going on this right side now that that Rocket is out of cycle.
Yeah, I mean, Professor Live, I don't really see the Expos really connecting to the tower, maybe using as a little bit of, pressure points, but probably going to end up seeing a little bit more of that Rocket cycle, trying to get the tower in this case. The Expo is going to lock onto the left-hand side, but just for a little bit as the Fire Spirit finishes it up. But just as we finish with the last Expo, comes down another Expo by Fitchy, but we see that Inferno Tower just eating that up quite nicely, and the Queen being prepared to go onto the right-hand side, and a Rocket just coming in with the Royal delivery on defense.
I mean, at the moment, Fitchy only holds the lead by 20-something damage points, so Professor Live has done well to somewhat catch up, but there you go, the Hog to come out. It will be the cannon to counter, so the cards are available for Professor Live. The Hog's not going to connect whatsoever, and it is going to be the Earthquake that deals the most damage in that instance, and Fitchy just struggling to get things to the tower to connect, but Professor Live with this Rocket cycle could actually be the difference between a win and a loss here, because Fitchy, while not being able to connect, Professor Live with this Rocket is not missing.
Yeah, that's right. Although we know that the Earthquake gets slightly more damage for the Elixir in terms of averaging things out, but the Rocket is a very heavy Elixir card, and then Fitchy can just kind of go in and get some more damage in with the EQ, so we're probably going to see a very close matchup as the Rocket comes in. So we see the Hog come in and then the cannon, so it's just going to be a rinse and repeat to see whose spell is going to get to the tower faster, and who's going to be able to use faster cycle cards so that they can get their spells out.
Cannon coming down in clutch there is going to stop the Hog, but it doesn't matter. He's good for a swing, even with the Rocket now. It's not going to equalize. This Expo is going to have to come huge in the last 20 seconds, because after this, it's going to come down to the damage drain. And at the moment, given how things are sitting, the Log to come out, it's going to be the Earthquake as well. And in the dying seconds of this matchup, Fitchy is going to lock it in. The Fire Spirit to finish the tower off. Professor Live, you could see it. He knew that it was coming. Fitchy, well played. Professor Live in good spirits, though, after that matchup. Fitchy had to really fight for that tower in the end. I mean, Professor Live with the Rocket cycle, I mean, it wasn't even his main card, but it was doing the most damage for him.
Yeah, I mean, you know, when the Expo simply can't get to the tower with so many counters being run by Fitchy, all we really can do is cycle rockets onto the tower. As we see, Fitchy with a slightly cheaper deck, but Professor Live is just going to, not get through, but he did run a cheaper deck right there.
Yeah, look, the Expo maybe not the best choice, given that Fitchy plays a lot of those tower target cards, slightly more of those mini tank cards, and until the Valkyrie there for him. So probably not the smartest choice for Professor to bring the Expo, given that this is the final match for Stage 1. And, lessons hopefully learned going forward into Stage 2. But either or, that means that Fitchy is going to walk away with game number 1 under his belt. So it could be a 2-0 here, provided Professor Live can't turn things around. I mean, still has a lot available in the bag. I mean, we still have E-Giant on the cards. We still have a Royal Giant deck available. I mean, we could see even some more cycles. We have the Giant Skeleton to be paired maybe even with a Graveyard. So Professor Live, still a lot of avenues to go down. It's just going to be which one he picks in game number 2.
Yeah, and as we see that Royal Ghost kind of coming in with the cannon card on defense, we're probably, and we see a little bit of laughter from both players as they try to judge and guess what each other might be running. And we see this Bandit coming in through, so we're probably looking for some sort of bridge spam versus bridge spam.
Yeah, with the E-Wiz as well, shaping up to be an interesting one, but a Royal Ghost vice versa from Fitchy. The Drill as well, so there you go. The Drill, the win condition, but the P.E.K.K.A to show his face for the second time tonight. As I believe the Ghost is actually connecting onto the tower there with the splash damage. So some good early damage in from Fitchy on that right side. Professor Live now with a good counter though, the P.E.K.K.A and the Royal Ghost, but it is going to be the Giant Skeleton Degree. I'd imagine this is shaping up to be that Royal Giant deck we talked about with the E-Wiz of his own.
Yeah, and as we see that Giant Skeleton being hammered by the P.E.K.K.A, both of those heavy hitters. Oh, the Giant Skeleton just manages to stay alive and is going to be backed up by the Golden Knight, which is going to get kited by the Battle Ram that we have there. But the E-Wiz is just going to get to the tower and managing to get both of his stuns on every single time, 3 or 4 there. And Fitchy slightly lower on Elixir, so he's going to allow the Bandit, unfortunately, to get to the tower with some question marks being run by Professor Live.
Equalising and, in fact, now taking the lead with that fireball as well. Fitchy loses all of the hard work that he just put in, and Professor Live is going to be able to deal with that Archer and ultimately not lose the lead that he had per queued there. So Fitchy probably a little bit upset with how that one panned out. Professor Live definitely playing that one a little harder, keeping an eye on the elixir costs and trades that have been going on. So well read into, as the Royal Ghost is going to have a relatively easy time cleaning up the Drill as well. So now comes to the big hitting cards, the final minute as it begins to elapse. P.E.K.K.A at the back, cannon cart as well with the Giant Skeleton. Everything's about to erupt on this right side.
Yeah, and we're still yet to kind of see what that last spell would be for Fitchy. But as we see a lot of things happening on the map with the Battle Ram kind of coming in from the left-hand side, being defended by that Electronic Wizard there, and the Golden Knight kind of defending the Bandits. We see 2 cannon cards being played by Fitchy, but just being short of connecting to the tower. And we see probably that Royal Ghost defending against that cannon card quite well. And now we see the P.E.K.K.A coming in from the left-hand side with the Electro Wiz and the Royal Ghost, another appearance of it, making onto the tower. And the Fireball coming in, and he just managed to, leave him only with 391 damage left.
This will be the big question now. Does Fitchy have a spell card? He still has one in the pocket. Could be a rocket, could be a fireball, but a great use of the Goblin Drill to draw that tower lock, and the Battle Ram is going to get rid of that card completely to allow everything else to clean it up. The Golden Knight now has a big task ahead to deal with the P.E.K.K.A, but it is the Tornado in the dying minutes to find its action on the battlefield here. E-Wiz will clean things up. The P.E.K.K.A now on the right side. Royal Ghost is going to have to go huge. We'll kite the P.E.K.K.A back for a moment, but things not looking good for Fitchy as he begins to scramble to throw cards down as Professor Live just keeps up the pressure, keeps up the momentum on this right side. But Fitchy so far has been playing the defense perfectly, gets the Golden Knight back down and is continuing to defend this onslaught.
Yeah, and as we see the final moments of this game, as Professor Live gets that win right there, equaling things up, and we see Professor Live with that classic bridge spam deck, with that little bit of laughter there, just managing to get hold of, Fitchy's drill giant skeleton bridge spam. So we see a bit of interesting matchup from these two players, but of course the prevalent meta deck always wins.
Yeah, it does at the end. I mean, Fitchy had a really good start with it and ultimately continued doing a really good job. But you look at the cost, you look at the price. This time, the cheaper deck does prevail. Professor Live, 0.2 on the cheaper end of the spectrum. Slightly cheaper 4-card as well. So more tower damage, I guess you walk away with the dub. Regardless, it sends us on to game number 3. So Fitchy now going to have to work hard if he wants to secure that victory.
Yeah, I mean, we see that last spell there run by Fitchy, which was the Tornado. It's not a very high, damage kind of spell, but it can get a lot of value if you can manage to use it well. We saw a little bit of that Magic Archer Tornado being played, but slightly off angle, so the Magic Archer wasn't really able to get all that value that he possibly could get. And, Professor Live just managed to spam things at the very end desperately on the map, but I guess that's how you play bridge spam, right? Just pressure the opponent.
Yeah, you got to keep everything down as much as you can. I mean, we saw him throwing cards on that right side towards the end of that matchup, and he just couldn't keep up. I mean, Fitchy was trying, but there was not really anything available in terms of just throwing things down. I mean, the Pecker, yeah, but what are you going to do? There was not really much available to defend to that degree of bridge spam. So Professor Live definitely happy with how that one panned out, propelling us into the third. I mean, what are your expectations deck-wise coming into the final matchup between these two?
I mean, if I was in the final matchup and, playing the very last match, trying to get that top spot right there, would I go for something off-meta and surprising, or would I just stick to my guns? I'd probably stick to my guns a little bit as well. I might be expecting a little bit of E-Giant being run by both of these guys. It'll be interesting to see if they both end up running the same archetype like we had in match 2. But also we see, Professor Live also using Recruits Pigs in the past, and also Giant Skelly as well. As we head to the third match, we see a Tombstone and a Barbarian Hut being played by these two players.
Well, Fitchy's definitely sticking to a more meta pick with the Skeleton King deck. I imagine he'll probably have a Graveyard and a Skeleton Army in the mix there as well. So the Spawner, though, once more showing itself, the Goblin Hut, this time the Barbarian Hut, as the healer at the back comes forward for Professor Live. So we could see the E-Golem here once more with the Electro Dragon, and I believe we probably will. It's going to be the Golem and the Double Dragons with the healer, and now the switch up of the hut to the Barbarian Hut to sort of deal a little bit more damage here to Fitchy.
Yeah, that's right. You're probably right in saying that he might be running the E-Golem right there, as we see this Barbarian Hut version of the E-Golem healer deck, which is slightly more expensive, but is also quite effective depending on what Fitchy is running. As we see Fitchy running the classic Skeleton King with that potential Graveyard hiding in there. And we just see now Professor Live not really sure what to expect as he tries to gauge Fitchy's next place.
Having the spawners both going towards that left side is going to just cancel each other out, and ultimately, obviously, with the Barbarians being more tanky, dealing a one-shot to the Skeletons, it's going to actually allow them to take over, provided Fitchy doesn't keep an eye on what's happening and continue to drop things on that left side. But there you go, the Royal Giant finally making his way onto the field on that left side, looking for a little bit of a split here. The Electro Dragon will be there to greet the Royal Giant's good for one, make it a second. Can he get a third before being taken down? Yes, he can. Massive damage for Fitchy, who is yet to take any tower damage whatsoever. The defense game from him right now is very, very effective. But there you go, we'll take his first point of damage as Professor Live does consolidate.
Yeah, that's right. We see 24-12 left on the left-hand side tower for Fitchy, and as the Mother Witch, the Skeleton King, Zappies, Tombstone, everything coming back behind on the right-hand side right there. But also we see Professor Live with that Tornado, which can just basically eat up all of the Skeleton King's skeletons if he uses his ability, which he won't end up using in this time. So now we see the defense being turned into a counter push as the Mother Witch gets eaten up by those two dragons we have right there. 5 Barbarians on the map, with Zappy and Skeleton King coming in for defense.
Flyball's going to be huge there for Fitchy. Really well dealt with. Professor Live, unfortunately, not able to make it connect. We go into overtime. 2 minutes of extra time on the board for both of these players for the final match of Stage 1 tonight. 2 of those dragons coming down. It will be the use of the ability there for Fitchy to get those skeletons onto the field. But given that there are 2 splash damage troops coming down that right side, not really going to have too much effect. We've got the healer there as well. I don't think we've seen the golem yet at all. No, we haven't. And it's just this constant hut presence from Professor Live. These barbarians are quite difficult to deal with right now for Fitchy. I mean, he's got 6 coming down that right lane just by themselves from the spawners.
Yeah, that's a crazy ton of barbarians, as we see a Royal Giant being played on the left-hand side right there with nothing else on the left lane, as we see a very interesting healer for defense. So the Royal Giant is going to get a ton of damage on the left-hand side tower.
5? Come on! 6 shots? 7 shots. And just now the defense comes out. It's the E-Golem finally to show himself in the last 60 years, but Fitchy taking that left tower down to 700 health is going to be absolutely astronomical. The rage spell now as well here. The damage starts to compound. Professor Live has turned it around on this left side. Can he get it done here? The damage from the skeleton so close. Yes, he can. Ladies and gentlemen, in spectacular fashion. Fitchy looks so good to make it happen, but Professor Live from the depths comes back with the rage spell and the E-Golem in the final 60 to close it out for himself. What a way to end the final game of the evening.
Wow, that was a spectacular game. Once again, the E-Golem come in clutch. I mean, he didn't really even play it until that very last couple of moments that we had there, and we see the average elixir being quite similar to these to each other, with the 4-card cycles also being very similar. But once again, that E-Golem coming in clutch at the very end, just being able to build up enough defense behind all of his counter-offenses and just managing to take the tower at the end, just overpowering him.
There was just so much there that they had to deal with. But I mean, those decks for the last few games were absolutely insane. We've seen an interesting mix throughout the evening. The Expo definitely not what needed to be being played. Fitchy with the more on meta with the Ogrider Valk. But yeah, deck 1 for Professor Live, definitely not a great choice coming into this matchup.
Yeah, and as we see, the Expo versus Hog, not really that great for Professor Live with the Expo deck. But as we see in deck 2, we've got the 2 Brit Spam decks being played against each other, with Fitchy running a more off-meta style Brit Spam with that Drill and that Giant Skeleton right there. But Professor Live just managing to clutch through with the classic Brit Spam deck. As we head into and look at the final matchups, we've got this spectacular showdown.
Yeah, that E-Golem deck, I mean, it hasn't been played up until this point in the tournament so far, or at least to the succession that these decks have seen. Professor Live, definitely an off with the Double Dragon and the Barb Hut switched out for the Goblin Hut. So a good switch up. Fitchy definitely could have had the tools to make that his match. I mean, the Royal Giant came in huge, but it just didn't get enough, unfortunately. 7 shots is a lot, but it's not enough to get rid of that tower. And ultimately, at the finish of that matchup, we have our bracket for Stage 2 ready to show to you all of the victors, the top 8 players in our upper bracket. Professor Live, SB, Default, Zornino, Fitchy, Orange Blizzard, Lemons, and Felipe have made it through to the second stage.
Yeah, as we see, some of all our 6 players from today will be heading into Stage 2 with SB and Orange Blizzard, who unfortunately got eliminated in the previous rounds, also managing to make it into Stage 2. Hopefully, Orange Blizzard's internet connection manages to stay put and gets him the win tomorrow.
Yeah, for tomorrow, we've got some pretty interesting matchups. I mean, we've got SB versus Professor Live. We've got matches like that are going to be absolutely riveting, and I'd imagine they will be the penultimate sort of mix between what we've seen tonight and throughout the rest of the stage come together, because this is where it starts to mean a whole lot more. Stage 2, this is the top 8 fighting out for the top place prize, 3,000 Australian dollars. But so far, I mean, Astro, your first night at Clash, final thoughts, how do you think it all went?
Wow, I had an amazing night so far, seeing all these, top 8 players or top 6 players in the ANZ region just fighting it out and just showing their talent and their skills on the arena right there, as we see some very interesting decks, some on-meta selections, some off-meta selections right there, and just them colliding together and producing some very interesting action and gameplays, and I'm going to expect nothing less from tomorrow's matchup.
Yeah, they look very spicy, I do have to say. I'm super excited to see how they pan out. I mean, look, it's going to be a great night of Clash tomorrow. We've had a great night tonight, and I think it's going to be even better tomorrow. But other than that, Astro, it's been a great one. We've had some good fun, but that is all from us here tonight at the UOA LPL Pro Clash Cup ANZ. We will return tomorrow. Same time, same faces. Don't miss it, because it's going to be an absolute heater as we kick off Stage 2 with some really, really amazing matchups. So we will see you very shortly, and have a good night.
Up to triple elixir with the Earthquake and Plague, sudden death, and oh my gosh, at the last second.
That was actually a big upset. Sudden death.
I think it's their game right there. Go Zero. There you have it.
Congratulations, what a great game.